Welcome to another episode of Tech Unhinged, where technology meets human. I'm your host, Rabia Javed, and today we are joined by Rich Tehrani, the CEO of TMC and the mastermind behind the IT Expo Tech Super Show. Rich has been a powerhouse in the world of cybersecurity, communications, and IoT for decades, and he's not just a visionary, he's someone who's actively shaping the future of these industries. Right now, he's also an investment banker at 4 Points Capital Partners, diving deep into the world of mergers and acquisitions. Not only this, but he has also earned recognition from the likes of Forbes, The Economist, and the New York Times, with a wealth of experience that continues to influence the tech landscape. We are super excited to have you today with us, Rich.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Rich, you've been a tech visionary for over 5 decades. But outside of the world of cybersecurity and M&A, what surprising passion or hobby you're into that might surprise our audience today?
Well, I don't know if it's surprising, but I try to be as fit as I can. I try to work out. I try to hike as often as possible. And I also like music. Those are my basic hobbies. I try not to do too many things that take away from my ability to work because I've got a busy schedule and I like to devote as much time as possible to getting things done.
The other day, I found out that the CEO of Goldman Sachs is a DJ, and this is something that he does for out of his passion. And he has an entire page there, and all his music. And I was super impressed.
A good thing about music is that it doesn't necessarily interfere if you're working as well, right? I like to have a lot of music when I'm working. It's a great hobby. I typically like the upbeat music normally when I'm working, but then there's sometimes, depending on what I'm working on, if it's deep thought, then I'll change it to a more relaxing kind of music. But I love music, and I'm also listening to more and more podcasts these days.
Fantastic.
Just like this kind of podcast. So
Well, Rich, let's jump off a bit into the topic warm up and context setting for it. With AI agents increasingly managing critical systems like network security and communications, do you think this is the logical next step for tech, or are we at a risk of letting automation run ahead of our ability to manage it?
Well, the challenge we have is that we've got two sides to technology. We've got the white hats and the black hats. And so we've got hackers using AI right now there's an increasing number of attacks with AI and enhanced by AI. And so to defend ourselves, we've got no choice but to use it as well. And so our ability to manage it is almost mandatory that we have to figure that out. And I think that's where we are as an industry, trying to figure out how these different AI agents are going to help run our companies and keep us safe.
Yeah, no, that pretty much sums it up. But with your background at Apex Technology Services, which provides cybersecurity to Fortune 200 companies, how do you view the surge of AI-driven security tools, which are now everywhere?
So yeah, Apex it's an MSP, a managed service provider. Like you said, we're providing IT support and cybersecurity to companies from the Fortune 2000 on down. That because we have that experience, that company is constantly looking for the best tools to support customers to keep customers secure. As an MSP, you've got no choice but to focus on really securing your customers, because if your customer has a problem, they could be out of business, and you want to keep your customers happy and running. And so the AI tools are constantly evolving, and the challenge is trying to find the right tools for the right clients, not being too far ahead of the curve, but far enough ahead that, like I said, that you're defending against these attackers who are getting more sophisticated. So it's a continuous learning curve. And I'd say in the IT service business, we haven't seen such a learning curve and need to advance since the change of the industry from just making your money by selling hardware to managed services where you would start to make monthly recurring revenue. So it's a paradigm, it's a disruption, it's a change, and every IT service provider, MSP, has to get behind it and stay on the leading edge.
So, Rich, in your experience, where a lot of companies are rushing to adopt AI agents for cybersecurity automation, where do you think the enterprises are getting the AI adoption wrong? Is it the strategy, the execution, or the deeper issues like data integrity and organizational culture?
Well, we're early on, and AI chatbot agents were maybe one of the first places that companies were experimenting. And what we found is that, the AI tech itself is not perfect because it hallucinates. And dealing with the hallucinations has been probably the biggest problem that companies have had to deal with in the last year plus, where courts have determined that if a company's chatbot says something, you have to stand behind it. So if it makes a mistake, if there's a hallucination, you have to figure out how to address the potential damage. So how do you minimize those hallucinations? I think the challenge we have as an industry is deploying AI that is not doing things that it should not do. And I think that's where we are right now. We haven't gotten there yet. I mean, there are things you can think about, like, if you were to run your answers from a chatbot through a few different AI models, theoretically you'll filter out all the hallucinations. And there are things that we're going to see coming to the industry going forward where that'll be more commonplace. But right now, that isn't happening. And so we do have challenges, and hallucinations is probably the biggest that I've seen.
But also, Rich, you've been a trusted advisor on, merger and acquisitions deals for years and have been watching tech companies go through transformative acquisitions. In today's climate, how should investors weigh the real value of AI when evaluating companies for acquisition?
So just because I'm an investment banker, I have to be careful not to give investment advice. I just have to make that disclaimer that I'm not giving investment advice. But having said that, I was listening to a podcast this morning, actually, Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, who I'd say is probably one of the most thoughtful investors and intelligent investors out there. Certainly one of the most experienced, successful. I mean, just can't say enough good things about him. Whenever I listen to him, I just feel like I'm learning infinite amounts of information or infinite amounts of knowledge. I'm just getting smarter. This morning, he was saying that he's pretty much all in on investing in companies that are AI first, looking to disrupt traditional companies. And he thinks that, in a lot of cases, new AI companies are just going to wipe out the existing ones. And I think that's the case. And so the challenge that companies have, we're early right now, so I don't expect an existing company to be AI first, right? I don't expect General Electric to wake up tomorrow and say, oh, we're AI first, right? That's a huge example. We are all now starting to take baby steps and figure out how this stuff works. That's the first thing we need to do. But then the second thing we need to do is re-architect our organizations as AI first organizations. And that is the more complicated thing that needs to happen. But keep in mind that there are startups with a lot of funding behind them from Andreessen Horowitz and others. Their website's A16Z. I mean, it's not a plug for them, but just in case anyone wants to learn more about them. There are a lot of VCs putting money in startup to wipe out existing companies. So if you're not going to be AI first and another company comes in and is able to produce similar quality work with a fraction of the expense because they're using agents instead of humans, they're going to undercut you on price, and you eventually are going to be out of business because you're just margins. You can't make money. And so you'll be wiped out. So ultimately that's where things are going. And so I think that to me is the most exciting thing is trying to figure that out. But it's early days. You have to kind of see what's the company culture like. Do you think this company culture is adaptable? Is it changeable? Changing company culture is not easy. So is it a technical culture? Are there scientists behind it? Are there techies, engineers? That's what I'd be looking for, because if it's a traditional, bricks and mortar business with paper and they haven't really automated, it's going to be really tough for them to leap to AI first. So I'd be cautious of that.
So, let's reflect a bit on the AI in practice and what's working out there for the companies. Just like Symbian, they are using AI agents to manage security operation centers, helping automate threat responses. So, have you, in your experience, seen any examples where AI has dramatically improved efficiency and reduced human error?
In a security operations center, probably the biggest challenge after dealing with actual real threats is dealing with the hypothetical threats or the theoretical threats, or we call false positives. AI is drastically reducing the number of false positives that humans have to look through, and it's been doing it for a while. And without AI, what you end up with is security researchers or security operations personnel flooded with thousands or tens of thousands of false positives, and trying to find a real hacker when there are a lot of false positives is the challenge that I think that most of these operation centers face and the personnel face. So the sooner we can minimize the false positives, the better. And AI is doing that right now, and it's getting better at it. And thank God, because again, there's more attacks. There's typically less money to spend on personnel in these centers. So AI has to keep playing an important part there.
Yeah, but see, Rich, since the boom is out there and most of the companies are already, have hopped onto the bandwagon of AI, are there any real world success stories that, you were inspired by?
Real world success stories. I write about a lot of them on my blog at Tehrani.com. I'm constantly blown away by success stories. I mean, I don't want to point out any one in particular. I mean, I would go there, I'd point people there, but companies are doing amazing things right now with agents. The agent opportunity is the biggest, and it's where you basically are having agents do the work of actual humans, and you're able to scale. We had one of our exhibitors at past IT Expo show. They were telling me that they had an agent that they deployed in an airport. It was a trial, really. Airline had a strike, or the airport had a strike, and the airline was doing the deployment, and they were deploying a small amount of agents just to see how it worked. But then all of a sudden, they were flooded with thousands of phone calls simultaneously, and they didn't have the agents to take the calls, human agents. So they had no choice but to use the AI agents. Handled the job well, and the airline realized that these AI agents really important because scaling is a big problem. And again, contact centers are another area where scaling is a big problem, and we're going to see agents there. And so think about, if you have a contact center where the number of calls around the holidays spike 10 times the normal amount. Can you hire 10 times the normal amount of agents? Yes, you can. You can outsource, but using agents is another way of doing that in case you have spikes throughout the year. So that's, I guess, one example I can give you, but there's so many others. I remember yesterday I was marveling at just how many I was covering. So yeah, I'd point you to Tehrani.com to keep tabs on that.
But then, that's the positive side of it, and nothing comes without the flaws. And you probably must have witnessed, technologies evolving, but with their flaws of the AI as well. So in your experience, where have AI agents fallen short, in perhaps overstepping their bounds or causing unintended consequences?
We've seen the hallucination issue, so that's the unintended consequences. But I'd say we're not at 100% parity with human to agent or agent to human. Yet we're getting really close. There are some technologies that are maybe 99 plus percent, but trying to approximate either human-like quality or getting to a point where customers or people on the other side are comfortable working with the agents, I guess that's got to be the next frontier, for at least for the ones that are human facing. But in terms of agents that are working within organizations, there are still challenges. Like just give you an example of something I've done with OpenAI, their ChatGPT operator agents. I've designed agents to populate databases, aggregate data from one database and then put it into another database. Interestingly, I had company names, but I didn't necessarily have the username. So I said, find usernames for these companies meeting my criteria and put them in a third database, a CRM database with the proper coding. And to me, I love sometimes to be on a call like this or just a meeting, and just out of the corner of my eye, I can look at one of my monitors and watch these agents populating databases. And so I was looking at it, and I saw it added a name John Doe, and I was like, that looks really artificial to me. But I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I looked at it again and it said Jane Smith. And I was like, these names just don't look real to me. So I paused it and I waited to the end of my call, and then I went to it and I said, okay, I looked and there was no John Doe with the company. There was no Jane Smith. And I said, what is this John Doe and Jane Smith? Where did you find these names? They're not at the company. And it came back to me and it said, based upon your request, I used hypothetical data. I was like, oh my God, I never told you to use hypothetical data when putting data in my CRM. I didn't want you to do that. So now my prompts include do not use hypothetical data if I'm making an AI agent. It's something that never would have occurred to me. And it probably wouldn't have, if you were asking a human to do that job, the human wouldn't have done that. But you need to change the way you give instructions because the AI really wants to please you and it goes too far sometimes. In this case, it went too far because there were no names that matched the criteria that I had, and I didn't specify what to do in that circumstance.
So, a bit of a human side towards this entire AI boom thing, Rich. As more organizations adopt AI agents to manage cybersecurity and network management, where do you see the line between letting AI handle autonomous decisions and ensuring that humans remain in the control?
So I gave an example of just kind of human oversight, and that's kind of where we are in these early days. I say, as we're allowing these agents to run wild and do more and more within our organizations, we need to keep an eye on them and just make sure they don't actually go too far and they don't run too wild. Over time, we're going to see multiple AI agents from different companies able to police the work of one another. And that's going to make life easier on the human. And then the humans will be flagging something that looks anomalous or looks weird. Like, for example, let's say you run the output of one AI agent through two others, and one of the other two agents thinks there's a problem, then maybe the human will flag it at that point. I think that's where things will ultimately go. But right now, you're going to get the output from one agent, and you've just got to keep an eye on it. Maybe at the end of the day, you'll look at the logs of all of the interactions, and you can run that through another agent and say, okay, what looks weird here? What is there? What problems could there be? So we're in early days, and you do need to keep an eye on things to make sure that you don't have excess liability because you're using agents that don't have the human, I guess, the guardrails that humans naturally have in the workplace.
And it is a hot debate these days that how every industry eventually is going to be replaced by the AI, and everyone is concerned with the recent Meta's update on how Meta's AI agents are going to take over the ad agencies, and that is very concerning for most of the businesses out there. Quite irrelevant over here, but then what it tells us is that eventually every manual work is going to be automated one way or another.
Every disruptive technology that we've dealt with has eliminated a lot of jobs, but it's also created a lot of jobs. And I like to use Microsoft Excel as an example. Microsoft Excel does the work every day. It does the work of probably millions of accountants. And yet the number of accountants continues to grow, and there's an accounting shortage in the world. And that's just an example of, because Excel has made it easy for anyone to be an accountant, or for a lot of accounting tasks to be given to people that maybe were not at that level, accounting level. They made it so much easier. It's now easier to start companies. It's easier for one accountant to do work in multiple companies. So the cost has gone down. So now starting companies has become less expensive. And so because starting companies is becoming less expensive, we have more companies. And because we have more companies, we need more accounting work. And so that's traditionally what's happened. Does AI present a new opportunity and challenge? Is it scary to me? Yeah, it's a little scary because, like you said, AI can do so much and it can replace jobs. And there is already talk of one person billion-dollar valuation companies where you don't hire anyone. You do everything with AI and you don't hire a single person. And certainly the Meta example that you give me is or that you just gave is really scary because, as Mark Zuckerberg has said, they are moving to a solution where you'll just tell it what you want, what kind of person you want to respond to advertising, and then you just don't do anything, and it just goes and makes its own ads, experiments. It determines which ad is the most effective for your audience. It determines where to run that ad, what time, what location, etc. And then you just get the answer. So yeah, that can wipe out ad agencies, creative agencies, marketing agencies, right? They've all now potentially been wiped out as this technology from Meta gets more widespread. So what do those people do now? And I don't have answers as to what those people are going to do. I mean, they're going to have to make the decision. And I've been hearing that, you're not going to get replaced by AI. You're going to get replaced by someone who knows AI better than you. And we have to hope that that's the case. And to the extent that everyone can learn how to use AI and adapt and become more proficient. We have an AI agent event we've launched at the end of September, the September 29th through 30th, 2025 in Washington, D.C. And we have a certification there, and it's a certification that to learn the basics of AI agents. And we're doing that because we want to help people to keep jobs, to show that they are trying to stay relevant in a job market that probably has not seen this much change since, blacksmiths were eliminated when the automobile came out and you didn't need horseshoes anymore and there were no more blacksmiths,
Yep.
right? Like some of the massive change like that. I think everyone needs to, it's called upskilling. Everyone needs to to upskill, and hopefully, there'll be lots of new opportunities for people. There will be for sure, but I don't know how many and if it's enough. And that's what we have to hope for as a society. But I mean, the flip side to that, and I'm sorry, I could go on just on this topic for a while. The flip side to that is that theoretically, it's going to be a lot less expensive to buy things because automated farming, automated food production, automated clothing manufacturing, right? Theoretically, this is going to bring the price of everything down. So now we're going to have access to more because things are going to become lower and lower cost. That's the theory. So we won't need as many resources to acquire those things. So the world is going through multiple transformations, and where this ends up is unknown. But upskilling historically has been the way to combat these disruptions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if, Rich, we look in the mergers and acquisitions industry and their readiness towards the AI, do you think that AI is now a hot commodity there as well?
AI is helping companies determine which other companies to acquire for sure. And it's also disrupting, just in terms of industries, the types of companies that are coming into those industries in terms of AI first organizations that are getting funded. I'm going to say that AI is playing a part, every part of business, from, I'd say, from banking analysis to putting together documentation to putting together models, business models of the target that you want to acquire. AI can put together business models that humans could probably do, but they do it a lot faster, and they can take into account a lot of factors that humans just wouldn't have time to do. For example, if you're looking to acquire a company and you have a business model and you believe that in the next 5 years that the company is going to produce this much revenue every year, or the earnings are going to be so and so every single year, you typically would have that model, and that's what you would base your value on, your valuation of buying that company. But now, there are all sorts of factors that could play into the profitability or the earnings of that company. And it could be geopolitical factors, climate change factors, wars, tariffs, embargoes, et cetera, right? All these other factors. Now, what you could do is get an AI model out the likelihood of these scenarios, and then how each of these scenarios in aggregate can affect the earnings of this company over 5 years. And so now you're able to have a much finer tuned set of earnings numbers for the next 5 years that you couldn't easily do beforehand. And you use those numbers to make a better, more informed decision. So, I mean, just like AI is being used by students, right? 10-year-old students, to help them learn, to help them make college papers as they get a little bit older, it's finding its way in everything.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's really true these days because, you're just finding AI at all of the crossroads, and there's no way that, you can just avoid it at this point in time. But then, Rich, given your exposure and experience with both the industries of, be it banking, finance, or the tech side of it, how do you, keep the balance, or how do you feel that your insights are different in comparison to someone who's just focused, in or towards just one industry?
Well, I mean, I guess there's two sides to it. I don't have the ability to go as deep on the things that I'm working on, and right, that's why I always try to get up earlier and stay up later so that I'm as immersed as I can be in all the different things that I do. But I think my unique insight is I'm very fortunate in that I've done a lot of writing and communicating over the decades, and that communications is quite often taking very challenging information from a founder who doesn't necessarily know how to describe their company very well, and then put that into something that's interesting enough for someone to read and something that they can absorb very quickly. And it turns out that when I'm helping companies raise money, or I'm helping them sell their company, that's a pretty important skill to have, to not only understand the technology pretty quickly, which, because I've kind of grown up in it, I understand, most technologies pretty quickly. I can get up to speed, very fast. I'd say faster than most just because I've lived it. And then on the other side, explaining it out to potential buyers, or to VCs, or to family offices, or to whoever's trying to make that buying decision, explaining to them why it might be a solid investment, or what they should be looking for. So I think that gives me kind of a unique perspective between those two hats that I wear. And it's exciting to be at the crossroads of both areas because, again, disruption Banking is getting disrupted by AI, media, technology, right? Everything's getting disrupted, and it's just fun to watch the intersection all at once.
Yeah, but then, also how does it feel like to be at the core, of providing a platform like IT Expo, a tech super show, and connecting with people from all around the world?
I grew up in the trade show business. My dad, at this same company, TMC, started a trade show in 1986, the first call center show, actually in Atlanta, Georgia, in 1986. And, I grew up building these live markets where people would come to buy and sell, where, we'd have exhibitors that are trying to sell things, and then we have buyers looking to buy things. And to me, it only gets more exciting to see the change happen in the market and how it's all evolving to be different kinds of solution providers that the buyers are looking for. And watching that evolution, maybe 25, 30 years ago when voice over IP was much newer, a lot of people were not sure if voice over IP was right. A lot of companies weren't sure, and we saw, it took a quarter century for them to understand that voice over IP and these communications networks running over their traditional data networks or their IP networks made sense. And now we're evolving that to have AI, and on top of that, we're going to have agents and generative AI, and so just watching the evolution of the types of technologies that companies are looking to buy has been really fun and exciting. Like in 1986, keep in mind, this was a few years. I'll go back a little bit earlier. In 1982, when our company launched the first publication in the call center space, first magazine, the traditional way of keeping your contact center or keeping your customer records was on a piece of index card inside of a metal box. That was 82, 83, 84. Then the PCs came along and we had mini computers and all that, and we eventually evolved to technology. So like I got to see from index cards where humans were on index cards, and then it went into a, maybe it was a mainframe, and then from the mainframe it went into a mini computer, and then the PCs were in the 90s, and all of that change and watching the different exhibitors and the different software companies has been great. And then we had this whole big run of cloud companies, and now we are seeing the AI companies. And are they going to replace the cloud companies? Are they going to be the same? Or a lot of that we don't know yet, but it's really exciting. So to me, bringing buyers and sellers together, hundreds of exhibitors, thousands of people from around the world looking to buy things, nothing is more exciting to me than that.
But the foundation to all of it was probably set by your dad.
Yeah, in 1972, the company was founded because he was a chemist, and at the time, there was an oil embargo because there was a war in the Middle East. Does that sound surprising to anyone? War in the Middle East.
Yeah.
I'm kind of making a joke because yesterday the Iran was bombed by Israel, so it's just,
Oh,
some things never
yes.
change. So there was an energy embargo. There was an oil embargo on the United States by the Arab countries. So all of a sudden, the U.S. had that we went from having cheap oil to no oil or limited oil, and so the way we had to work changed. So my father realized at the time that the way we manufactured was going to evolve. And at the time, if you painted a car, for example, you put it through an oven, and the oven was open on both sides. You heated up this car to dry the paint, and all this energy was wasted, and that we couldn't do that anymore. So that was the birth of new pigments being put inside of paints, where instead of having to use heat to dry them or to cure them, as it's called, you'd hit them with ultraviolet light. And now, if you go to a nail salon, it's very common now that you'll see ultraviolet lights in nail salons. That technology was the first climate friendly or green technology invented in the 70s, early 70s. And my father launched a whole bunch of magazines to teach companies about these new coatings and these new paints. That actually was the birth of TMC back in 1972. So that's where he started. And, for me, I was fortunate enough. He allowed me to grow up in the company. He allowed me to, I was putting stamps on envelopes when I was 6. I started getting paid when I was 9. So I learned the value of work, and I learned the value of making money. And thank God I had that opportunity. And so I owe him a debt of gratitude.
Yeah, and not becoming a chemist after your father.
I never was a fan of chemistry. To me, it was just it was boring to me for whatever reason. It was just a lot of, especially the chemistry classes I had at engineering school. It was more about numbers and conversions than actual what chemistry could do. Computers to me fascinated me because because when I was working for my dad in the mailroom, my parents got me a computer as a present, and I was using the computer and I learned how to program. And then we had hired a consultant and they put a computer in our office, but they never finished the job. So I had a computer there using the same language, BASIC, which I had learned at home, and they just didn't do any of the programming. I was like, and I said to myself, well, wait a second, I know how to program. Maybe I can do this. So I just figured out how to program, and I automated all of the work that I did in the mailroom, and I was able to put all the names inside of the computer. And then from there, we were able to outsource the mailroom work to the printer because they had an automated way to put the labels on the magazines. And so I automated myself out of a job, but I then became the IT guy, and I didn't have to lug around magazines anymore. It's a much better job. But I said to myself, wow, look what computers can do. Look at just how automation for me allowed me to change my life, and it just blew me away. And at that point, I wanted to be an engineer. I just wanted to learn how to program computers. But at
Hmm.
the University of Connecticut at the time, you had to be an engineer. So I did
Hmm.
a lot more of the math conversion stuff that I just told you about that I really didn't want to do, but I did all that because they kind of forced me to. But yeah, my love of technology just came from that.
Yeah, so now we'll talk a bit about the future of the AI agents that, we supposedly all of us think about. So if you look at the next 5 to 10 years, Rich, do you believe that AI agents will take over most of the network and cybersecurity decisions and would be able to operate with, little to no human oversight at all?
In most cases, yeah, I'd say we'll get to in 10 years, we'll be at 99% plus without human intervention. And the reason for that is that you're going to have different AI models that are different enough that they will act as the human oversight. And because the cost of AI is plummeting, cost of the hardware is plummeting, as long as the electricity is there, right? That's our limiting factor. Will we have the electricity? As long as the electricity is there to power all of this, then the AI becomes closer and closer to free. And so as that happens, then multiple models attacking the same problem from different angles and maybe comparing their results. Ultimately, there could be a human oversight when there are some conflicts or there's some issues, which will get filtered up. There'll probably be some kind of mechanism, some kind of alarm to send to a human in certain cases. But for the vast majority of situations, especially I mean, this is for all of a company, but cybersecurity, especially because you're dealing with something that is so time critical and time sensitive, because you've got all these tools that the good guys are using, the bad guys are using too. So while they're attacking you, you've got to respond as fast as they're attacking you. And if you don't, you can't say, okay, we're going to escalate this to a human. Oh, the human's sleeping. Well, in the morning when he or she comes in, they'll deal with it. I mean, that's not a solution. Or you could just have the human look at it and then analyze it if they're 24/7. But even then, it doesn't take much time as these computers get faster and faster to do an enormous amount of damage, critical systems. So you've really got to fight them as fast as they come in. Have you ever played the game Fruit Ninja?
Yeah.
If you've played Fruit Ninja, I think of
Yeah.
it in my head as Fruit Ninja, right? Fruit's just I haven't played this game in years, and I don't even know why I thought of it. But fruit is just coming at you, and if you're not slicing the fruit as
Yeah.
it comes, you're gonna get hit in the face with a mango or a watermelon. And you don't want to be hit in the head with a watermelon. You want to have your sword and you want to hit
Yeah.
that watermelon, and hopefully it goes on both sides before it hits you in the face. And that's for and it's not just that, it's for everything. I mean, I'm thinking of these AI agents as like fruit ninjas, and they're just like problems are coming in and they're just chopping the problems. And sometimes you'll have multiple ninjas, right? Like I said, right, to solve these problems.
Yeah, no, that's true. But Rich, how is banking and finance going to be affected with the emergence of AI? And what has been happening, over there in that industry? What is your insight in that department?
It's changing everything, right? So the area of banking, which I'm really not involved in, is investment management. So that's an area where I'm seeing a lot of disruption just because AI can pick stocks and can determine what are great investments, oftentimes better than a human. But then you're getting into the modeling of numbers, which, a lot of the work in banking is modeling of future revenue and then also and earnings and also trying to present data. And AI is really good at all of that. And I think you mentioned the CEO of Goldman being a DJ. If I remember correctly, the CEO of Goldman also said that when they put together a document for a company going public, which is called an S1, I think it was a tweet he put out, if I'm not mistaken. I remember reading, I think I was in the gym when I got it. I was kind of blown away. I was in between sets looking at it. I was like, wow. I think he said 90% of an S1 can now be put together by AI, but still 10% needs to be done by a human. And obviously, that 10% is really important because you can't make mistakes. But 90% now can be put together by AI. And so, at least at this stage, we've gone from having to do 100% of the work to 10% of the work, crucial 10% of the work. And you need a lot of experience to know how to do that 10%. And the problem, actually, this is another problem, and that is that a lot of those entry level jobs are kind of drying up because AI is doing those entry level jobs. So the question becomes, how do you gain that experience? That's a problem for another podcast, I guess. But the point is that, so like you had said earlier, I think you said about 20, 30 minutes ago that, all the manual work is going to get done by AI. And so whatever is considered manual, and so what is considered manual? Well, putting together documents is manual, really. It
Yeah.
is. We think of it as high value work because it was, but is it? Is it high value work if the computer can do it? And the answer there is that more and more of this work is just becoming what we would consider manual labor where the computer will do it. And, the one thing that didn't get mentioned is, okay, the human needs to do that last 10%. Well, what happens when you attack that same problem with three AIs or four AIs or five AIs or six AIs? And now it's 99%. Is it 99%? I mean, is that where it is? Is it 100? Those are unknown areas, and that's kind of where things are going with everything. Again, it's not just bank, it's every job, right? Legal. It's the same thing with legal. As good as a lawyer as you can hire, they cannot store the entirety of every legal case in their head, give you information that is as well-rounded as the proper and I'm not saying the algorithms are there, as the proper AI algorithm can do, because it doesn't have access. He doesn't have access to that information, and maybe given enough time, he or she could, but it's just the computer has instant access to it. And so for all these jobs, medical diagnosis, we're already seeing that AI can diagnose cancers better than the majority of doctors. So that's another area, radiology. And it just goes on and on from there. Banking's getting disrupted. All of banking's getting disrupted. M&A is getting disrupted. We all are getting disrupted. So it's unknown where this is going in terms of where those jobs are going to be and what those people are going to do or how we're going to evolve. But upskilling seems to be the best thing you can do right now. And whether we're all going to have our own startup and that's the future, I don't know. But it's going to certainly be an exciting time. Whether that's a good exciting or a bad exciting, I don't know. It depends on your role in the organization, right?
Yeah. But also, one surprising thing about you is that you have academic background in software engineering. But then, from the past 5 years, you've been an investment banker as well. So how did you come across this particular industry?
I had no interest in doing this at all. This is not something if you'd asked me years ago, I just thought of it as another area that I had nothing to do with, and I never will. But my clients asked me for help with mergers, and they kept saying, "Can you help me with this? Can you help me? I want to sell my company to this group. I want to sell to that group. Do you know people? Do you know someone here? Who would you sell to? What would you do? How would you plan for the future? Help me with my roadmap. I want to make my company valuable so I can sell it." And so I just was doing that kind of work, and then the next thing I knew, they wanted me to do the whole job of selling the company for them. So I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And then someone asked me, "Can you help me raise money?" And then when I started doing the money raising, I didn't even know I needed to be a banker. I learned I had to become an investment banker. So I had to take a whole bunch of courses and do a lot of studying and learning. And I did all the courses and so that's kind of how I got here. I didn't plan to be here. I didn't want to be here. I love it now. I love seeing the other side of technology because, to be honest, without the rich companies, without the rich people to give their money to venture capitalists to put into tech companies, we would not have any of this innovation. All of it, all of it, all of it. Google is an example. I mean, the computers, all of it came from venture capitalists making decisions to spend rich people's money to try to get a great return on their investment, betting on something that's a lot of times seems crazy. Like, I'll just give an example. Uber. I mean, 20 years ago, everyone in the world, if you ask anyone in the world, should you get in a stranger's car, they would have said, no, what are you?
Yeah.
Obviously not. You learn that at age 4. Don't get in a stranger's car. And someone decided to build a business based upon people getting into other strange people's cars. And it became, tens of billions of dollars, wiping out the taxi industry. Now it's becoming a massive part of the food delivery industry, grocery delivery, all sorts of deliveries, because someone thought that they could do something differently and in a way that we were told we couldn't. And VCs were there to put money into these companies, and they also had to go against what they were brought up to believe. And thank God we have these VCs, and getting to work with
Yeah.
them, I got to say, it's some of the most exciting work I do. Some of these VCs are the nicest people on the planet. Others, they're like any other industry. Others can be challenging and difficult and challenging to deal with. Maybe they had a bad day, they had a bad investment, whatever it is. So, it depends when you catch someone. But as an industry, thank God for these people. And when we look at why is America such a land of opportunity, and it's not the only land, right? India and other countries are doing pretty well, but thank God we have this very strong base of investors that have helped propel constant innovation.
Yeah.
And hopefully that continues.
Every day is a new day, and as long as you keep learning, one can, keep evolving, I believe. Moving on to the next question, Rich. If you were advising a CEO or a CIO today about integrating AI agents into their organization, what's the one hard truth they need to face when it comes to AI autonomy?
So, okay, AI autonomy is the eventual goal. I like to call it the autonomous enterprise. Start slowly, start with the agents, get up to speed, learn. Like you said, improvement, improvement, improvement. Every company has to focus on becoming AI first. You have to. If you're not, you'll be disrupted by someone who is. Start deploying the agents, test, measure, manage, improve, iterate, test, measure, manage, improve, iterate over and over and over. I mean, we're at a crossroads. I actually wrote today about, the next challenge is going to be getting these agents to work with one another. That's another area that eventually we'll have to figure out. They say that IT is going to be the next human resources, the next HR, which makes sense because
Yeah.
you're going to have these different agents as humans. Right now, they're doing the work. So now how do they work with each other? What if one makes a mistake? Does it get amplified through the other agents? So you can't make a mistake if it's a critical agent. How do you double check that it's not making a mistake? Because now it's going to ripple through your organization. So test, measure, manage, just stay on top of it and understand that we're going through a massive, massive shift. And if you're not ready for this shift, you may get wiped out. Maybe now is the time to sell your company to someone who can deal with this. Figure it out, hire people. There's going to be a big industry of companies helping. It's something we're looking at Apex also is, from IT services, how do we help with AI to evolve, to help these companies evolve? Because not every company has the stomach to do this. Even if they have the money, it's managing and code and it's liability if the agent makes mistakes. I mean, there's a lot here. How do you deal with all of this? It's a whole different business model, but you have to do it. You have to do it. So start slowly, but then ramp up fast.
Yeah, yeah, but given that we're somewhat way ahead in it, do you believe or think that there is any misconceptions out there that are already known and that is something which can be avoided by C-suits at this point?
I think the biggest misconception is probably that AI is not going to affect my business.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Unless you're, and there maybe if you're doing plumbing work, or there are probably some areas where you'll be okay. Even truck drivers that, 10 years ago they would have said, "Oh, I'm not going to worry, I'm always going to have a job." Well, there are autonomous trucks. I mean, they're not widespread. There are issues, there are safety issues, et cetera, that will get worked out. But, thinking that you're in a role, you don't have to worry about it. When ChatGPT first came out a few years ago, when it no, it was, I think it was version 3.0 when it became more popular, and I was telling my doctor friends about how you can do a diagnosis with it. They said, "Well, I don't want to work. I don't want to deal with that. Hopefully I'll be retired before this affects me." That's my social circle. A lot of them were saying things like that, and I just think that, you need to realize this stuff is getting fast or it's getting good fast, and it's going to disrupt what you do. Your company is going to get disrupted, maybe not in the next 4 months, but within 18 months to a few years thereafter. Things are changing. You need to stay on the leading edge of it. You need to be educated, and you need to devote time every day to staying on top of the different AI tools, the different things that are happening. You have to be on X. You have to see what's happening on LinkedIn, stay in the news, whether you're following my blog, whether you're following, there are a whole bunch of sites out there which are really good. TechCrunch is good, CNET's good, ZDNet is good. There's a bunch of great sites out there where you can follow along. VentureBeat can be good. It's more on the investing side. But even general business publications, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, you got to stay on top of this stuff. And
Yeah.
if you're not doing it, you will not make it through this transition.
In your exposure, given that you work with different sorts of people, be it in tech or in investment banking, have there been moments when you had to deal with those traditional mindsets, who are still keeping pace up with their legacy systems and still reluctant to move on? Is there still a lot of room to be improved there with those people?
There are, we're still using floppy disks to maintain the airplanes in the US, right? Our air traffic control is floppy disk based. And so the plain truth is that, the programming language COBOL still runs a lot of technology in the US and in the world. I think I wrote about it a few days ago. One of the investment banks has made a tool that converts COBOL to newer languages. Thank God. That's good. AI is helping evolve the old systems into the new. But yes, and that's a common problem. And if a company is, let's say it's 20 years old and it's got systems that have been built over 20 years, I feel for them because converting that, and I've seen it, like for example, my IT consulting company, I've seen some of the clients there, they work certain ways with certain software in that you wouldn't think that software should do what it does. And they've kind of tweaked it and they've kind of made it where their CRM is based on something that shouldn't be a CRM, and it works for them. But how does that become an AI first company if their tools are not as flexible enough to work with the AI? And so this is painful. This is a painful process for companies. And that's why when you talk about M&A, I mean, it's not just the culture. What are the tools that are being used right now? I think Salesforce has done a good job of evolving their systems to have AI on the front end. So if you're based on Salesforce, for example, on your CRM or some of these others, you're probably in better shape than if you're using some other systems that are not as up to date with AI. And so, yes, the problem is these legacy systems are not going to get upgraded right away. And this is why someone like Mark Andreessen is betting so much on disruption, because it's a heck of a lot easier to give money to someone to restart it or to start a company that's AI first than it is for someone who has a 20-year-old system that their company is based on and to figure out how to turn that into AI first. It's not easy. And so, like I said, this is big, big disruption for companies. It's going to be scary for some people, and rightly so.
Are there any people in your close circle that you've given this advice to?
I told my doctor friends get up to speed on it. Right? I took out ChatGPT at dinner and I said, give me some of the, tell me about the symptoms of some of the patients that you've seen this week. And I put the symptoms in ChatGPT to get a diagnosis from ChatGPT, and I showed them, and they couldn't believe it. This is again when it first came out. It just, right after they had a mobile app,
Yeah.
they couldn't believe it. And you saw the light bulb go off above their head, and they got it. And so I mean, that's a good example. But I have other doctor friends. I don't know why all my friends are doctors. I have a lot of doctor friends apparently. Now that I think about it, I have another doctor friend that I was talking to her about cybersecurity, and she said that's why I keep all my patient files on paper in folders. So I almost fell off my chair. I immediately said, well, what if there's a fire? And she said, well, we keep them in fireproof cabinets. And I said, well, what if there's a flood? A pipe burst. It happens. What are you going to do? Do you take a picture of them? Like, I didn't go down that. But anyway, I think my social circle, if I'm going by my social circle, I mean, maybe they've aged out of AI, I guess, maybe. But
Mhm.
when I live in the tech world, it's a totally different thing, right? So when I'm with my tech colleagues, it doesn't matter how old you are. They all know, right? Unless they're retired.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you're 65 and in tech or 70 and in tech, you know that you've got AI is the thing and you better learn it or you're just not going to be around. You're gonna, assuming you're still working at that age, right? If we look at the job numbers in the US as an example, our unemployment rate has been pretty low for a while. So obviously, a lot of work that was done by humans is being done by AI. A ton of it, a ton globally.
Post,
Yet we are
yeah.
not seeing mass unemployment. We still do have obviously jobs that are being created, despite the fact that, AI, I'll throw just a round number out there. AI is probably doing the work of 20 million people right now, right? 20, 30, 40. I don't know. It's got to be at least 20 million people, right? Yet we're not seeing an unemployment crisis in the world. So, and we're not even seeing a huge uptick. So, point there is that not everything gets replaced overnight. Things are going to evolve. Even if I was to reinvent General Electric as an AI first company and have a much, much better solution than General Electric because it's AI first, General Electric still has customer contracts, 5-year contracts, 10-year contracts. They have customer relationships. They have a reputation. So the technology, we have to be careful as an industry to not get too far ahead of ourselves. I think it was Bill Gates who said that, we overestimate every technology in 3 years, underestimated in maybe it's seven, if that's a 7 to 10. So we may be overestimating, but then what's going to happen is this stuff's just going to happen when we're not talking about it as much. And maybe that's going to be 3 years, 5 years from now, whatever that is. So that means, what does that mean? That means we're in the opportunity phase. That means that now is the time as an AI first company for you to start a company that's AI first, to try to disrupt whatever industry you think you can disrupt. We're seeing a lot of startups, and that to me is the most exciting part of my career is that I get to write about these cool startups and whether it's healthcare or whether it's finance or legal. It's great. It's great.
And Rich, you've been, writing for quite a while now, and I was just curious, what still keeps you passionate about writing, given the advent of, ChatGPT, AI, and lots of other writing tools? Do you happen to have a digital twin of yours who is doing it now?
I love communicating, but I don't love portions of writing. There are certain portions of writing that I despise. I'm not a huge fan of making introductions to things. I'm not a huge fan of making conclusions to things unless I'm really passionate about that topic. AI gives me this unbelievable ability to take raw thoughts and raw notes and raw ideas, and sometimes I can put a fine point. I wrote something this morning where I said, okay, I like this research report. I'd like to start out an article like this, the following, and I give it the first few paragraphs, and then I say, okay, and here's a research report. Keep going. So something like that. I've never had that ability before because I would have to go through the whole research report. I would have to determine what the best part is. Then I'd have to second guess myself. I don't want it to be inaccurate. So is this really the best part? Is it not the best part? I think it's the best part, right? And that could take me 5 hours just going through the research report. But now I have a point I want to make and I have the research report. I'm able to disseminate that information in a way I could never do quickly before. And because I couldn't do it quickly, I might not do it. That's a huge change where I'm able to share information over the last, decade, the decades of information I have and the decades of viewpoints in a more succinct way, at least time-wise for me, but with the full breadth of information to support predetermined notions of things, if that makes sense. So now I'm able to do this work that I couldn't do quickly before, but now I can do it more quickly and I can get the information out there and I can start the conversation with my community and move on. And so that to me is great. And that is worth getting up for because I've taken the drudgery out of my own life, the parts of my life that I despise, like I said, certain parts of writing I just hate. All the parts I love, I can do the parts I love and
Yeah.
I can allow the AI to do the parts I hate. And I proofread it and I edit it, right? And sometimes the proofreading is better than others. There are occasional hallucinations that I may or may not pick up. I do my best to get them all.
Yeah.
But again, you're dealing with AI, it's not perfection, but if you can get it to 99%. And sometimes in my AI, I'll have AI help me with something and then I'll run it through. If it's something where I think it's really factual issues that could be a problem, I sometimes have a sense I'll run it through a second AI as a
Yeah.
proofreader. In the beginning, I didn't have any clue about writing, even though I took classes where they taught us how to write. I was too much of a know-it-all in college because I said, when am I ever going to need to write? Why would I ever need? I didn't really
Yeah.
even pay attention the way I should have in college and in high school to my writing professors who, in hindsight, were really, really good. But I didn't
Mhm.
pay attention to them at the time, so I didn't have the experience. But then I was kind of on the job training, and over the years, I kind of understood. I think, if you, especially nowadays, people are so pressed for time. I try to put takeaways at the beginning of all the things I write. And I think the takeaways are important because I know even myself, I can't read everything I want to read, but at least if there's an interesting headline, if I can get five takeaways out of it, I get a sense of what the article is. I'll just move on. If I want to read it, I can. Sometimes I'll save it for the weekend.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think that's where the world is going. We just don't have the time to read as much long form
Yeah,
content.
that is what I was coming to next, right? That people don't have that kind of attention span anymore. They would rather, watch a 30 seconds reel over reading something. So, what then keeps a writer motivated to still be able to keep doing it?
These are really interesting questions. I don't know how to, this question can be really applied to a lot of work. AI is changing it. I happen to hate certain parts of what I was doing. I'm lucky. I'm lucky because AI can do those things for me. That's what keeps me motivated. And I know some people are going to read, not everyone, right? But not everyone read anything that, the best read articles still. I'm sure not everyone has read Harry Potter, right? It's very War
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Peace, right? Not everyone's read everything. So, not everyone's going to read it. So you do it because you want it to be complete, but you have to kind of provide it. I mean, it's almost like, after I'm done writing, I'll tweet it, I'll put it on LinkedIn. So not everyone on Twitter is going to want to come to my blog either, right? So they'll stay on Twitter or they'll stay on LinkedIn. So the question is trying to get the information to them in the area or the form that they prefer to have it, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, that sort of brings me towards the end of our conversation and the last question. Rich, over the years, what's this one, hard-learned lesson that you've had in your life, be it, back in your academia or your professional life? I love it when my guests have to think on that.
I want to give you the most accurate answer. I think understanding disruption and when your business is going to get disrupted and what it's going to do to you. I mean, just from my own business, we used to have a thriving magazine business that went to a thriving online business, and now that's turned into more of an event business. And so, seeing disruption affect your business and not thinking that you are smarter than the global economy and trends in the market. And this is just from my own running companies. You don't know what's coming around the next corner. And if you don't think you're up to the task of dealing with the disruption that's coming in AI, and this kind of comes full circle. If you don't think you're up to the task of dealing with how it's going to affect you, you need to make a decision soon. Either you're going to sell your organization or you're going to make a conscious decision that you're AI first because nothing else, I mean, again, except for the plumbers and some of those roles, you won't be around. That's a hard truth that I learned some time back, and you continue to learn it. You continue to learn it. No, every industry gets disrupted. The number of companies that get wiped out gets increased every year. More companies get wiped out. The percentage of companies, existing companies, they just don't make it through, and the pace of innovation continues to increase. So it becomes tougher and tougher for a company to last through the ages. So you need to either you adapt or die, you evolve or die, and that's just the name of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your valuable insights for our listeners and viewers.
Thank you. I appreciate it.